Hello. Yeah, I was thinking about something. In the last video I did about my son Joshua, I mentioned that that's probably the most painful thing in my life. But I thought about that a little bit, and I thought, and divorces. Those are definitely the top painful things. My choices in that, and failing in marriage. What a nightmare. But I think this might be maybe even the hardest topic, the church, in my experience. Um, yeah, in the church. At some point, maybe I'll talk about my test, how I got born again. But I'll start from there. When I first got born again, these cute girls invited me to a Bible study, and I was at a real difficult point in my life. I was really searching for truth, and so these cute girls invited me to a Bible study, and I just remember going to the Bible study and hearing Jesus's words. And I had heard them before when I was a little kid. I mentioned in another video that I got kicked out of, seventh grade twice, and I went to a continuation school. But my parents, even though they weren't Christians, they put me in a Christian school, Valley Park Baptist up in LA and in the Valley. And I got kicked out of fourth grade. At that school, and then I went to another Christian school, and I got kicked out of there. So two Christian schools in fourth grade. I just anyway. So what was my point? Okay, so these girls, when I went to the Bible study, they opened up the Bible, and I heard Jesus's words, and I just remember thinking, he's not lying. There's no deceit in him, and I was so searching for truth. I won't go into detail, but I had a gun to my head just a month before that. A loaded gun into my head. Um, anyways, I remember I fell in love with the Bible. I read the whole Bible in the old King James version. I put like 5 different bookmarks in different parts of the Bible, and I would read a page and a half every day. But that group was a cult, again, called the Way International. So I pretty quickly came out of that, maybe 6 months or so. And then I started watching the guys on TV like Kenneth Copeland. I thought he was, you know, um, and then with the struggle that I already mentioned with lust, when I got born again, a lot of things changed. My language changed, the music and what I wanted to watch on TV changed, but the desire for a woman never changed. And I'm 60 and it still hasn't changed. But so, anyways, I think I'm trying to think. So after watching that, I ended up in the army, and I fell away from God. Uh, I just walked away from God. I don't remember exactly the whole. Anyway. So I went to the military, and then when I got out, I moved back to San Diego, and my sister invited me to a fellowship in La Jolla called the Vineyard Fellowship, and that was the first time I started serving in the church, and I loved it. Um, yeah, they had a ministry. We brought meals, and there was a young mom that had cancer, 2 little kids, and I was able to bring meals to them. And I worked with the kindergartners in Sunday school. That was really fun. Kindergartners are the best. I think kindergartners are the best. And then I met Paige, and I tried to serve we lived up in Encinitas. I tried to serve in Encinitas at the Calvary Chapel, but that became difficult. Uh, and then, like I mentioned, I went through some recovery ministries, and I went through the ministries, and then I tried to serve within the ministries, and then I eventually moved back up to North County because that's where Joshua was. Paige was living in Vista, so I went to North Coast Church for about 10 years. I learned a lot there. Again, having the background of the Way International, and then Kenneth Copeland type of Word of Faith kind of ministry. Larry Osborne and Chris Brown, I learned a lot. They had some good, solid teaching, and I served. They had lots of opportunities to serve at North Coast. So again, I went there for about 10 years. And then after my second wife, Mary, left, when she sent out the email saying that I had been with all these women and that I tried to kill the baby with cantaloupe, I got called into the office at North Coast. And it's such a big church that the guy who I met with didn't really know me. And it was just not a good situation. Mary wasn't there, of course. She didn't, it was just, yeah, it wasn't handled well. It just, because such a big church, I think that's one of the reasons. And so after that, I ended up moving down to San Diego, and I went to a Reformed church off of Miramar Road, off the 15. And there was a really good book called What is a Healthy Church by Mark Dever. That was a really good book. I bought a bunch of copies of that book. I recommend that book, What is a Healthy Church by Mark Dever. And anyway, so there were some issues. The pastor, before the pastor that was pastoring when I went, he had gotten a big scandal. I didn't know all that, and then I had a couple issues I had an issue with the current pastor when I was there, about some integrity type issues, and also Calvinism taught predestination. I'm not going to get into that here, but I don't fully agree with that. That God chooses some for hell and some for heaven. That's a huge theological. But anyway, so I ended up moving out to Set Free Ministries. That's one of the ministries that I went through a couple times out in El Cajon. And Harold Brown was the director, and he helped me get an apartment out there. And I started to try to help out there, etc. And then Harold was having Bible studies on Wednesday, a men's fellowship at his house. And I was listening to what he was saying. And then all of a sudden I said, Harold, are you saying that the blood of Jesus doesn't cover our past, present, and future sins? And he says, no, where did you get that idea? And I thought, wow. And so I ended up going into his office, and we talked for 45 minutes and agreeably disagreed. But that was kind of the end of my stay at Set Free Ministries. Anyway. And then I went to Maple View Baptist in Lakeside, and they had a men's fellowship that would meet quarterly. And I said, why don't we meet weekly? So we started meeting weekly. And I was going through 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and it was talking about the love of God. And I was being really convicted. What does that look like? What does that mean to love God and to love my brother? And I remember one Sunday, there was an older gentleman by the name of Paul that had been going to the church for a long time. I don't know how long he had been at the church. But I just remember asking him, I said, Paul, how many close friends do you have? And he paused for a minute, and he said, well, I used to have a close friend that lived next door, but he died. And that was it. It got quiet. And I thought, wow, he's been going to this church for a long time. He doesn't have one friend, So, and then I realized that, some of the leadership wasn't, not that they didn't come to the Saturday morning meeting, but I think I sent out a text saying something like, if we say that if we aren't interested in getting to know our brothers, maybe we're not in the faith or something, of course. And I was direct. I said, maybe if we, and I just found that, so that was an issue. So, okay, I'm trying to think. So they actually wanted me to go before a board kind of a thing, or the pastor and a couple of other guys, maybe not a board, and that was just weird. And Jake Simpson was a good friend of mine for years. And, he was the one who said he had a problem with me asking those kinds of questions. But I was asking myself these questions. If we're not loving each other deeply, what are we doing? And how do we do it? Why can't we just put it on the table? So, I wanted to back up on that. One of the things I was going to say is that when I first got born again in that cult, I got born again in a cult. When I read through the Bible, it was the book of Jeremiah that jumped out at me. And again, that was 40 years ago. And out of all the books in the Bible, I love my favorite chapter is 1 Corinthians 13. But But the book of Jeremiah really jumped out at me. And then later, probably 20 years later, 20 years ago, that movie Luther is probably still my favorite movie. And, what Luther went through, and I, yeah, so the reason I mention that is because, Luther, when he went to Wittenberg to get his doctorate in theology, he got a hold of the Bible and he's looking at the church and he's like, this doesn't match, and he was just trying to understand. Again, he was including himself. And, the Bible tells us to love our enemies and do good to those who persecute us. And the Holy Roman Catholic Church at the time, first they excommunicated him, and then they tried to burn him at the stake. They couldn't catch him. They burned other priests at the stake. So, that was my first experience in, again, trying to question what was going on when I was reading the scriptures, and it just didn't go well. So I'm trying to think after that. Where did I go after that? Gosh, I've been to a lot of churches and tried to plug in and serve and try to really get to know people on a deeper level. What does that look like? And I found that I think rugged individualism and materialism in America makes it difficult for people to want to get really close. And discipleship, I thought about that. Jesus, he took those 12 men and he didn't just teach them, he lived with them. He, like they say, more is caught than taught. Like for children, what they see with their parents is more than even what the parents say. And, so Jesus let them see him up close, live with him basically for 3 years. And then Paul, he said, I didn't just give you the truth, I gave you myself. And he called Timothy, Titus, and Onesimus his sons in the faith. And do we see that? Do we see older women, mothering younger women, or older men fathering younger men? You think about somebody who comes out of maybe a Muslim background, and their whole family, rejects them. They have to have a new family. And that's what the church is supposed to be, a family. And I'm not saying that this doesn't happen at all, but I just didn't see it. I wanted more. I still want more. So, and I think the reason I mentioned that this was even more painful is because, Joshua, my son, has a choice, and he has two parents, Paige and me. And I've definitely made mistakes. And I think about King David, with his sin, it said something about the sword wouldn't leave your house or something. And his own sons, rebelled against him. And so I take, I really believe that's part of my struggle, what's happened with Josh. But at the same time, Joshua has a free will of his own to choose. But the church, true born again believers, why can't we be one? That's what Jesus' high priestly prayer in John 17, 20 and 21, I have it over my prayer cave, was that, he said, Father, as you're in me and I'm in you and we're in them, let them be one. And then you look at the book of Acts in chapter 2, it says they broke bread daily in each other's homes. They had need of nothing. They shared, if anybody had need of anything, it was just a beautiful picture. Beautiful picture. If you haven't read, Acts chapter 2, I believe it's in Acts chapter 2. But, and the Bible says they'll know us by our love for one another. And again, that's where that love bomb essay came from. And I might read that sometime on here, but that's kind of been my experience in the church, and I'm still struggling. I'm trying, but it's been kind of time and time again. I could go into other examples where, I was just trying to shine the light on my stuff, and I have stuff. I don't have the gift of being single, again, 1 Corinthians chapter 7. And again, this may be just my own, whatever. But so I've struggled with being single. When I was married and being intimate with my wife, I was happy as a clam. But so I'll be honest about my struggle, but then I'll eventually see something in the church that doesn't seem right, or I don't understand, or like I just mentioned. And it's just not welcome to be questioned. And I guess the biggest thing is real community. Do we really love each other deeply? Are we, yeah, that, wanting to be one? And I thought about it, just everybody bringing everything into the light so that we can heal. The message of the gospel is that God loves us just where we were. We didn't have to get cleaned up to get born again. So we're born again, but we still have these areas in our lives that we need to grow and mature. And so for me, I want to keep it all in the light. Lust, impatience, anger, those are things I don't like. They don't line up with my, being a follower of Jesus. But why can't we all do that and just be honest about the things we struggle with? And maybe the next one I'll go into friendships, and even my closest friends don't seem to want it be fully known. I've tried, that's maybe another video, but even my friendships within the church, people that I believe are Christians, it's been really challenging. But it's funny, I got my dog shirt on, and I was thinking, Buddy, he's been a really good friend. He hasn't left, and he's a good guy. He even goes in my prayer closet with me. He loves it. And then when I come out, he wants to go back into the prayer closet, or it's not prayer closet, my prayer cave. And but he wants to jump back in there after we leave. It's like he's a good example of a friend. All right, again, thank you for watching my videos. I hope you guys are having a good day. Thanks. Bye.